And in Delhi, they say, oh my God, caste census will destroy this country. So such is the hypocrisy on this question that someone had to bring it up, and Rahul Gandhi has brought it up. And now BJP finds it extremely difficult to wriggle out of it. As they say in Hindi, na nigalte bane na ugalte.
Main objections, and there have been several objections to having a caste census in the first place. Like logistically, this is going to be a nightmare.
In terms of actually operationalizing it on the ground, it will take probably 30 extra seconds for each interview. How would it derail the census? What makes it nightmare? What makes it logistically impossible thing? I'm aghast at this. Another myth, this is designed to break Hindu society. The caste census would be operationalized only on Hindus. And look at these fellows. They don't have the courage to ask this question to Muslims and Christians.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Express. My name is Pooja Pillai. My guest today is Yogendra Yadav, who is a political scientist and political activist. We all know him. He's also a columnist for the Indian Express, and his weekly column, Deshkaal, comes highly recommended by all of us. In his latest column, in fact, he has tackled the caste census, one of the most contentious and highly debated topics in India today. It raises a lot of emotions, anxiety, enthusiasm equally. And Yadavji has actually busted 10 half truths about the caste census in his column. To begin with, sir, I would like to ask you, you have talked about how this is not the first time that the caste census is being discussed. It has come and gone, it has entered public conversation, it has left, now it has returned. Why do you think it has returned now? And it is not just because of Rahul Gandhi, I think you say. So why has it come now?
Well, in a sense, the stage of history is set for it. As you mentioned, anything to do with caste, it's not just caste census, anything to do with caste raises anxieties because it suddenly touches on something deep that we all are very uncomfortable with. It exists, we feel very uncomfortable about it, and we'd rather close our eyes to it and pretend all is well. Therefore, anyone who raises the question of caste is attacked for all kinds of reasons. And what amazes me, Pooja, is the mix of sheer ignorance and a certain kind of arrogance that you get to see whenever you deal with the question of caste in a urban, civilized, liberal setting. How can't we talk of something else? Oh my God, you've started discussing such things. That's usually the response. Why has it come back now? It has come back clearly because of Rahul Gandhi's intervention. Rahul Gandhi has brought it to the forefront. But as I say in the article, there's actually nothing new about this demand. It goes back to independence time as a formal written request. It goes back to Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. When Mandal Commission had been announced, Supreme Court had given a judgment in its favor, and the first census after Mandal was to be 2001. And at that time, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, social justice ministry of his own government recommended it. The Registrar General, Mr. Unni, a great Registrar General of Census actually, he recommended it. That was turned out. It came up once again before the 2011 census. The Lok Sabha debated it for 2 full days, came to a consensus that it didn't happen for reasons that we don't need to go into now. And then before 21 census, Mr. Rajnath Singh, who was the Home Minister in 2018, he promised it. All the concerned departments and ministries have asked for it. Parliamentary committees have asked for it. 6 or 7 state governments have asked for it. And BJP of Bihar takes credit in getting caste census done in Bihar. And in Delhi, they say, oh my God, caste census will destroy this country. So such is the hypocrisy on this question that someone had to bring it up, and Rahul Gandhi has brought it up. And now BJP finds it extremely difficult to wriggle out of it. As they say in Hindi, na nigalte bane na ugalte. You can't swallow it, you can't throw it out either. That's BJP's situation. And the latest twist from RSS has made it worse for BJP, or shall we see that as a hint of the direction in which things are likely to go, namely caste census The time for caste census has come, and it's going to be extremely difficult for Mr. Modi and for this government now to wriggle out of it.
Since you've mentioned the RSS and the shift in its position or perceived shift in its position regarding the caste census, can you give us a brief history of why it has opposed the caste census? We know that it has opposed the caste census. And also, a related question, there are those who believe that the politics of Hindutva can be fought by the caste census. Can you talk about both these aspects?
From the BJP side, the fact is that BJP and RSS have ideologically been opposed to any kind of caste census, caste awareness, because their project of consolidation of Hindus, basically, they would like all the Hindus of this country to remain one single monolith. And any recognition of differences therein is something they would wish to avoid. However, history has taught them that there's no way they can avoid it. So RSS has now come around to talking about Dalits, about Adivasis in a different language. The language still remains patronizing, but they have actually have to recognize these things. And the latest shift, although I'm not sure RSS has used the word caste census yet, but from what their spokesperson, Ambekar, said yesterday, it's quite clear that he is talking of caste census and accepting that, yes, for governmental policies, for certain kind of welfare measures, you have to do it. And frankly, all over the world, the only way of tackling any deep-seated inequality, whether it is caste or race or gender, the first step has to be to recognize it, to count it, to monitor it, and then do something about it to change it. So it's a belated recognition, but they have had to. On the other hand, the other camp believes that somehow simply by raising caste question, you can counter the BJP. I'm not entirely sure. It is true that yes, raising the question of disadvantages within the Hindus. Incidentally, that question exists within the Muslims as well. There are Pasmandas within Muslims. It's a question within the Sikhs, within Christians as well. There are Dalit Christians. So it's a question that cuts across. The belief is that raising that alone is enough to counter the BJP. I'm not entirely sure, because BJP will sooner or later find ways of accommodating this question. BJP has quite successfully electorally accommodated the Adivasis with its own language of Vanavasi and so on, which remains patronizing. But the fact is, electorally, BJP has been quite successful. So it's not true that BJP simply cannot accommodate the Adivasis. Among Dalits, BJP has very carefully courted the bottom of the Dalits, the Safai Karamcharis and others who are extremely disadvantaged and have not had decent share. BJP has plugged onto that kind of vote possibilities. So in the long run, BJP can tackle this issue. However, in the short term, this is bound to go against the BJP, and especially if BJP seem to be opposing it, something that they have done so far in a pretty inconsistent manner. This is bound to go against them.
Sir, one of the main objections, and there have been several objections to having a caste census in the first place in the public conversation. So one of the main things is that it's just going to be too difficult. Like logistically, this is going to be a nightmare. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, because this is one of the things you do address in your article.
This amazes me. I mean, it shows just the level of ignorance we have. So what I thought was I'd just show you so how do we do a census? We do a census when a school teacher typically comes to your house, brings a form with her, and she starts asking you questions. How many members in the family, education, gender, this, that, and the other. Let's look at that form. This is the form for 2011 census. It's called the household schedule. So this is a form which the teacher brings with her to every single household. Okay. Now, as we can see in question 8, just focus on question 8. The question 8 clearly says scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. On the left, you see religion. Later on the right, you would see language as well. So the first thing to remember is caste has always been asked in the Indian census post-independence. Only the question formulation was slightly different. The question used to be, are you SC, ST or not? And now look at 8B. Question 8B said, if you are SC or ST, if someone comes to my house and I say, yes, I'm SC, the next question would be, what exactly is your jati? I would say Jatav. So they would write Jatav from the list that they have. This has always been the case. What would it take to have a full caste census? Now, it's a limited exercise. It's done only for 25%, namely SC and ST. What would it take to take it to the entire population, to make it 100% caste census, that is census of all the castes and communities? It would take only a minor tweak. And this, you can see this image where I've actually done the tweaking myself with a red pen. All that you need to do is to change the title from scheduled caste or scheduled tribe to simply caste, in line with religion and language. The question would become, is this person from SC, ST, and I have added, as you can see in red, OBC or general? All right, it's a very simple question. And category 1, 2, 3, 4, you give 4 categories. The next question, which used to be only for SC and ST, which said, if you are SC, ST, give your caste, now will become a general question. It will say, if you are SC, ST, or OBC, tell your caste, and the caste will be recorded as per the list already provided, because we do have a list of SC, ST, and OBC in the country. You don't need to start ab initio. If you are general, however, suppose they come to your house, you say, I'm Pillai, which is neither SC, ST, or OBC, at least to my knowledge, then they would say, all right, then what is your jati? You would describe your jati, they would exactly record it. They would go back to their office and then subcategorize, because they don't quite know this as yet. So they would do. Now, it might look like so in terms of carrying out the census operation, as you can see, reformatting, even in the Indian Express office, if you were to sit down and reformat it, your graphic designer will take about 15 minutes to do what I have done with my pen. This is the logistical nightmare that everyone is talking about. In terms of actually operationalizing it on the ground, it will take probably 30 extra seconds for each interview. Because earlier, in 75% cases, you would skip and go to the next question. Here, you would have to stop and ask this question. 30 seconds extra operation. What about back row, though, when forms actually are brought back? For 75% people, we already have their caste known, there are lists. For 25%, 25% people, we would need to evolve categorization. This will take time. It can take more than a year. And mind you, there's nothing scandalous or strange about it. So many census tables usually come 5 years after the census. This is the standard practice. Some census tables come within 6 months, which is considered very quick. Some census tables come after a year or two. And some census tables, like language, usually come 6 or 7 years after the census is over, because this classification business has to be done in a very minute way in every single case. So the same thing might happen with caste. What is the big deal? What is the strange thing? How would it derail the census? What makes it nightmare? What makes it logistically impossible thing? I'm aghast at this.
So is this the most persistent myth that you feel you've encountered in your conversations with people?
That's one of the things. But the other myth is, we've never had caste census in this country after 1931. The fact is that we actually asked caste every single time. The myth is that, and another myth, this is designed to break Hindu society. The caste census would be operationalized only on Hindus. And look at these fellows. They don't have the courage to ask this question to Muslims and Christians. I mean, this is laughable, because this is asked to every single community. The fact is that there are hundreds of jatis within Muslims, biradaris. There are different sects within Christians. There are jatis within Sikhs. The question, if there is a caste census, it would apply equally to every single caste and community. Some people say, especially in urban setting, they would say, but my children have no caste. We have done intercaste marriage. Mr. Yadav, how are you going to solve this? My response is I would solve it exactly the way I would do it for my own children, because we have also done intercaste marriage and we've not given any name, any caste surname to our own children. So they would say, no caste. This is permitted. This is permitted because in religion, once again, if they come to your house and you say, well, I don't believe in any religion, you can perfectly legitimately give an answer, no religion. And this answer is given by a few thousand people every time. It makes no difference. It doesn't take away anything from the census because only less than 0.1% people give this answer, but that's all right. So no one is forcing you. All these myths take place because there is lack of awareness, lack of information, plus deep-seated prejudices. And that's something I do want to mention. The trouble is any powerful and privileged group in this world doesn't want to give up its privileges. And the best way to retain your privileges is not to talk about it. Invisibility is the best protection of privileges. So newsrooms were dominated by men. And you didn't ask this question, oh, how many women do you have in the newsroom? The question was never asked. The moment you start counting, things start looking very weird. So same with caste census. The most privileged sections of our society, which is the Hindu upper caste, Savarna Hindu, or whichever name you use, that group enjoys disproportionate access to resources, to opportunities, to jobs of all kinds, to property, to every other thing that you can think of. And the name of the game is not to make this visible. And therefore, the task of anyone who wants to bring about social change should be to unmask it. And to my mind, one of the biggest contribution of the caste census will not only be about simply about showing how disadvantaged SC or ST or OBC are and what is the exact disadvantage of each jatis. All that is very, very useful stuff. Just the kind of stuff Supreme Court wants us to collect. But to my mind, the biggest contribution would be to unmask the structure of privileges. This general is a very strange category. Everyone else is marked. In the US, everyone else is colored. Whites have no color. Here, everyone else, 80% of this society is not so general, is peculiar. Only 20% are general. This general needs to be the privileges enjoyed by this need to be unmasked. And that, to my mind, is critical, not only for social change or social transformation, not only for advocates like me, advocates who believe in caste annihilation, etc., but for anyone who believes in the Constitution of India. Because remember, Constitution of India, in its preamble, offers equality of opportunity. Our fundamental rights mention the same. Our directive principles say the same. So in order to be true to our own constitution, we have to practice equality of opportunity. And equality of opportunity comes only when you begin to document, when you begin to recognize and document the inequalities that do exist. I cannot practice gender equality unless I know how many women there are in the newsroom. And unless I know what is their scale, what is their position, what power do they enjoy. If I simply say, oh, I don't see any difference between men and women, they are all equal as far as I'm concerned, why are you talking this language? This would be a way of ensuring male dominance. It's only by naming, recognizing, collecting information, and monitoring it that we can combat inequality.
Sir, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is actually what now I'd like to ask you, which is that counting, of course, is a very important first step, gathering that information, having that information to work with. But to keep it from remaining an empty gesture, what would need to happen once the caste census is over, is done?
A lot needs to happen. Most of the proponents of caste census have something fairly narrow and limited in their mind. Most of them hope that the caste census will demonstrate, which of course it will, that the sheer number of SC/ST, OBC is much more than is imagined. In the case of SC and ST, we are unlikely to be surprised because the census has always enumerated them. But in the case of OBCs, of course, isn't it a scandal in this country that you have legal reservation in jobs for a social category of the number of which we don't know? So we give 27% to someone. We don't even know whether they are 40%, 50%, 60%. So this scandal will come to an end. We'll discover that it's something between 45 to 50%. So one thing that people expect is after that, there would be a demand. All right, then the quota should not be 27%. It should be increased. Although the quota was not 27% because anyone believed that their population was 27. The quota was 27 because of a legal ceiling by the Supreme Court of 50%. That has been the reason. So there would be clamor, demand, justified demand to my mind for removing that cap and going beyond 50%. But that to me is not the only thing. For me, the more important thing would be to go to more nuanced issues of social justice. Everyone debates quota within quota. We had this debate on the subclassification of the scheduled caste. For that, we need Jati-wise data, which fortunately is available in the case of SC, but it's not available in the case of OBC. The judgment that said OBCs should get reservation, the Indira Sahni judgment of 1992, had also said that every 10 years or so, you should review and see which communities may not deserve it any longer. We need to get to know those things. We need to see whether the national quota of OBC itself should be subdivided into 2 or 3 categories. We also need to see whether caste as an institution is weakening in its effect on economy and educational opportunities. We would get to see those things. We would also get a detailed inventory of the resource base of this country. So in a sense, we would get the first real X-ray. Of course, you have to follow it with action. Action can be on affirmative action in one limited sense. But to my mind, sooner or later, we would have to confront the question of social justice outside the government sector. How can you keep it limited only to government jobs and public sector institutions? You have to ask the question about what about private institutions? While, and once again, this is one more bit of complete ignorance on the part of most Indians. I believe in the US, every company has to declare the racial profile of its employees every year. Why can't we ask something like this? Why can't we at least get to know? Because the real happening sector is no longer the IAS and the public sector jobs. The real happening sector is the private sector. So can we think of affirmative action schemes? And by affirmative action, I do not mean reservation. Unfortunately, we rely too often on reservation as the only mechanism and caste as the only criteria. I think we need to move towards a more multi-dimensional, multifaceted instruments for social justice. And I particularly hope that the census would give us a clear sense, a clear idea, information, evidence-based, on the basis of which we can design a more multi-pronged mechanism for social justice.
Thank you, sir. That was such a great explanation of the issues that you raised in your article. Deeply appreciate this conversation, and we look forward to another conversation after your next column for us. This was Yogendra Yadav ji talking about the 10 half-truths about the caste census. Do read the column. It is in the Indian Express. This is Pooja Pillai. Thank you so much for joining us.